he explains why he's an admirer of Stalin and actually says something that I was surprised to hear, because my assumption is that Nick Fuentes is a murderous, brutal dictator who wants to do Hitler and Stalin type things to people who are not white Christians. And I'm being a little facetious there. I don't really truly think he wants to do those things, but I thought he thought that was cool. And he actually explains, this jumps to another show he was on, why he said he was an admirer of Stalin. And I thought that's important because his admiration of Stalin comes back to Stalin's strongman powers of forcing industrialization in the Soviet Union, and that's what we need right now is a forced, subsidized, government-paid-for, government-directed reindustrialization of America. And so
because it worked out great for the USSR.
That was really good for them. Here's that clip.
So it was like mid-December, late December. It's actually funny. It was December 18th. I remember because that's an important date to me. And it's Joseph Stalin's birthday.
Oh.
I'm a fan.
You're a fan of Stalin.
Mm-hmm. Always an admirer. But we don't need to go into that. I guess.
Well, that's okay. Let's get back to it. We'll circle back to that.
I can't remember the name of this. Something Danny D, Johnny G. Play it.
Tommy G.
Tommy G. I was close.
Agree you have some hilarious moments, but there was a moment from the Tucker Carlson interview I wanted to ask you about.
Yeah.
You mentioned Stalin. You're a fan of his work?
Yes.
Was that serious or a joke?
That wasn't a joke. But, it's like anything else. I love history. And I love stories. And to me, Joseph Stalin is an extremely compelling figure. I would say more, you'd be surprised to hear this, than Hitler. Everybody pegs me as like a Hitler guy. I'll tell you, and I'm not saying this to pander, I'm not saying this, because I care about what you think of me. I really don't even know that much about Hitler. I never found Hitler to be that interesting. I think that there's narratives about Hitler that are interesting. In America, if you talk a certain way about certain issues, they say you're a Nazi, you're Hitler. So it's interesting in that way. But for me, Stalin is the far more compelling figure. And I say that because, while everybody focuses on Hitler, Stalin is a person who takes Russia, which is the most backwards country in Europe at the beginning of the 20th century, serfs and peasants and just all around immiseration and poverty. He takes a country like this, and by the time he dies, it's a nuclear empire. It's a global superpower. It's like the most unbelievable story in the history of mankind. And so I don't think he's a good person. He's an evil person. He's one of the villains of history. But in terms of his effects, he's an effective ruler. And I think that's interesting.
Almost as if all of that was worth it. The strong manning, the putting people in gulags,
starving people to death.
But you know what? We became a nuclear empire.
Yeah.
So,
just killed like 40, 50 million people along the way.
That's fine.
However many.
Whatever it takes to be an empire.
Not to mention a bunch of their industrialization numbers are just fake, made up numbers, and they were allocating their resources towards things they didn't need to, and that's why their economy was actually still so terrible.
And you talk to any Russians who were there during the time, it was the most miserable lived experience you can imagine, except for the elites.
Except for they had an empire afterwards.
Which is Fuentes' favorite thing.
And
you see how this all comes together?
You'll hear that he disagrees and calls him evil and murderous and all of that, but you might, let's say he is talking about Trump, which he's not. Maybe he was in 2016. Sure, maybe Trump is not an evil, murderous dictator, thug that's going to be doing these things. What about the next guy? He's even going to mention here in a second, I think we need to have a dictator type person for a short amount of time. He's going to say that because there's nothing so permanent as a temporary dictator.
Yeah.
As they say. Mm-hmm. Here's a little bit
more.
Well,
they win elections.
Yeah.
I've heard the word dictatorship. Correct me if I'm wrong. So I would ask you, since the end point seems much more similar to where Stalin reached, just swap atheism for Catholicism or Christianity, would you be able to name, or is there any one thing that you think America, concretely, should copy about Stalin's rule or methods to get there?
There's a comment here in the group that I wanted to, Michael Scarn pointed out something that triggered something in my mind. It's almost like he has a power growth at any cost mindset. And that's kind of what we were just saying, but it spurred another idea in my mind. For whom? What is the point of having that if you kill millions of your people and they live a terrible life, and like sure, you're left with like an elite few who happen to have thousands of nuclear weapons, but for what? Where is the good in that?
And at what cost?
What is the ultimate value of that thing if you had to kill everyone to get there and you're just an elite powerful few that has thousands of nuclear weapons? Where that can't possibly be a goal to aim towards for anyone, right?
Let's get Nick on the show.
You know, like a couple of years ago, that was probably possible. Probably not now.
Not his methods, because, like I said, he's an evil person, or a murderer, and genocidal. Arguably, with the famine, I mean, I think it's pretty clearly intentional that they were trying to kill all those people there. And so, I want to make that clear. Sometimes I feel like it's almost childish, and I'm not saying that about this interview, but just in general, when people say, "Wait, but he was a bad guy," it's like, I know he's a bad guy. Like, I know he was evil. And I suppose the thing that I find maybe more compelling about Stalin as a ruler is the way that he industrialized the country. I'm very interested in this because that is, among the other things that I talk about, a very important problem in the country is that we're deindustrialized.
Yeah.
And what Stalin did, and I said that in that clip and in other clips too, he takes a country that has no industry and he literally, and with brutal, evil methods that I don't replicate, I don't support that, but he does take the country and drag it into the 21st century. And he does that by bringing in heavy industry. The 5-year plans, the collectivization of the farms, it was about prioritizing heavy industry so that they could eventually build ships and planes and tanks and, the things that they needed to fight the war. So,
but it was about seizing industry, and it was about doing it by force. I mean, secret police, the party purges, the show trial. So if you say the industrialization of the country, how do you separate that from, the only methods were largely evil, or certainly his calling card methods, right? That's where people would say, okay, if you point to him as an example, is there anything worthy of emulating other than, because you could point to other countries that have industrialized, including the United States.
Well, I don't think that is necessary. I think because it starts with the idea that a country, an empire, needs industry. You need to be able to make things. We don't make things. We don't even make the machines that make things anymore. China makes all the things. And so starting from the idea where Stalin says in the 1920s, he says, we're either going to do in 15 years what it would normally take us 100 years to do, or we're going to die. Our country will not exist anymore because we are encircled. And I feel like America's in sort of a similar position where we need to race ahead of China or else we are going to be destroyed. We need industry back in the country. And I don't believe in taking grain to feed the factory workers and enslaving people in gulags. But I do think the government needs to it's sort of like when JFK said, we're going to go to the moon in 10 years. I like the idea, this ambitious idea of we're going to catch up in 10 years. We're just going to go out there and do it. We're just going to build it. And I don't support, killing people. I don't think you need to kill people to achieve that. But I like the idea of urgency, setting targets, having a national strategy, and and doing it for the sake of power projection.
Well, and I agree, by the way.
And doing it for the sake of power projection.
For what?
It's interesting. There's this line that a lot of Christians use. Doesn't he a Christian or claims to be a Christian?
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's got to be.
If you gain the whole world, but sell your soul in the process.
Mm-hmm.
I believe this was said in Matthew. I believe it's from a Psalm as well. Basically, what is it? What does it even mean? If you become the ultimate power structure, but you had to use methods that go against morality to get there, it's all for nothing. And the line is more along to do with if you gain the whole world. If you gain the whole world but lose your soul in the process. Also, it talks a lot about if you gain all these things but do it without love, then what's it really worth anyway?
Well, it's for love of country, so there's love there. He talks about how I don't think you really need to kill people in the process. And the thing is, you're going to have to force people to do things, especially when you're wasting resources
That's called
in
enslavement.
the manner like you will have to force these things to happen because the market is just like people's natural tendencies and decisions to buy and sell and trade with one another in the things that make their lives better. And like, so the market is going to be saying something else needs to happen. People are naturally going to be saying something else needs to happen in this scenario. And so you might not start off like having to kill people to do this, but you'll start off by having to take their money and then putting them in prison if they don't give you money to do this. And then eventually, as you're forcing these industries to exist.
How we figured out why America is today deindustrialized compared to what it used to be. Why did that happen?
That is a good question.
Why is a lot of the labor jobs and stuff in China?
It must have been too much free market.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why did all those things happen?
The free market just made the decision to do that on its own.
Yeah, exactly.
And the government's been begging them to come back, and they just won't do it.
Yeah.
And I'm being sarcastic if it's your first time listening right now, but obviously what Charlie is getting towards is that it is our big, all-powerful government that pushed whatever businesses did leave and go to other countries. A lot of people, they point to job losses, and they're like, those jobs, they got shipped over to other countries. A lot of them actually just got lost because there's a machine doing the job now. We don't need it anymore. We found more efficient ways of doing it. We don't need the people anymore. Like many of them were lost through new technology, not just they literally took those jobs and they took them over to China or down to Mexico, something like that. But of the ones that did get pushed out, there's a reason that they've decided it's cheaper to do their manufacturing in China and then put it on a gigantic ship, just a really big one, bring it over here to a port in the U.S. and then take that and ship it around the country to people instead of just doing it here in America.
That's, by the way, that's cheaper.
Yeah.
Crossing the entire globe.
And a lot of times it's not the labor. Like, sure, the labor is a little cheaper. It's the time. Because the Chinese government does have like this top-down approach, and when they decide that this thing is going to happen, it's not like all these different local and state governments and the unions and all these different people, and then they vote, and then there's a proposition on a thing, and then they're going to decide if they're going to do that. They're like, we're going to do this, and here it goes. So it happens very quickly. You see these videos around on X, like, oh, they built this bridge in 4 days from Temu, and like all this kind of stuff. And
it just collapsed. But, they're going to rebuild it in 3 days.
and so your question would be like, well, why can't we do things that fast here? And it's not because the government isn't directing these things to happen. It's because the government stops those things from happening in every way it possibly can. And then they throw in other expenses like taxes and all of that. Like we've said in the tariff conversation that sure, if you at the end of the day, I mean, I wouldn't really do this, but for the sake of conversation, at the end of the day, you're like, we got to have something to fix this unfair imbalance. I'm saying that because Crowder says something like that later. Okay, before we do that, like our housing conversation, let's get to zero. Let's equalize first and get on a level playing field, and then we'll have the conversation afterwards. And by that, I mean, let's stop everything the government does to make everything take longer and cost more and just be more troublesome for these businesses. These people would love to be here in America. We've got a population of 350 million, and we do like 25% of the world's consuming of things, even though we're, what's 350 million out of 8 billion, like 4% or something? I don't know what number that is. Like a very small percentage of the world's population and a quarter of the world's consuming of things. Plus, it's just a better place to live than most places, or probably every place around the world. They would love to just have their business here in America, and everyone here works in America, and everyone's happy. There's a reason they don't decide to do that, and it's not because they love living in China, or they love flying long hours to go meet with a person and bring a translator with them or something like that. Like, they don't want to do that. They would love to do it here and ship stuff around the world. It's too expensive. That's the problem.
In all ways, not just labor.
Let me get to the...
And by the way, thinking about that, it goes against the very thing that he's talking about, because America led the Industrial Revolution in the 20th century, started by Britain, but then America took over because of liberty, by the way. That's why we were able to ramp up the Industrial Revolution so much. It didn't come from government fiat.
Crowder mentions that. He's like, we were able to industrialize without like this Soviet-style approach.
Yeah, because of liberty.
Because people were allowed to do it.
Yeah.
They want to do that.
So my question is, am I mischaracterizing, how could you get, if we're talking about now, to Stalin's industrial results without Stalin's methods? If you want to get to a Catholic, first off, have you said Catholic theocracy? Is that, am I misquoting?
I might have said it, but I don't believe in a Catholic theocracy. I think that the government should be Christian, but not a theocracy.
Okay. Not a dictatorship either?
We might need a very powerful executive for a short amount of time. I think that's maybe unavoidable.
Okay.
But not an ideological totalitarian state, no.
So how do you write that into law?
You, sir, will be king for 10 years and 10 years only. You can do whatever you want.
Not ideological.
For 10 years. Oh, I can do whatever I want, including changing the 10-year maximum.
Yeah,
okay.
You can.
Yeah, fine.
So how do you get to that in the industrialization that you talk about with Stalin? How do you get it? How do you get there?
I think that you need tariffs. I think you need subsidies. I think you need a massive public works program, something like the New Deal. And I know you're probably not a fan of that because I know you're a huge free market guy, but I think that one of the things the free market doesn't do well is it doesn't allocate resources efficiently on like a long-term timeline. In a long-term timeline, America needs to have a ton of industry to be able to support its Navy, to be able to protect supply chains and trade routes. And the free...
All right, I did have to talk about this. I think I was reading comments in the group. Did he also just said the free market was not good at investing on a long-term timeline? Right. So I got two things, and then he just mentions we got to be able to make steel for the Navy. This is something that Trump has used so much for, like, we got to protect the steel industry, we got to protect it. So the numbers currently are we produce domestically in the United States, steel producers in the U.S., 86 million tons of steel annually, 86 million tons. Yearly, annually for our military, they use about 350,000 tons is what they need. So we are we could actually go way down on our steel production. Like 300 to 400,000 tons is what they need. And we're producing 86 million tons of steel.
Cut it in half.
So I just say that to make the point. We don't need tariffs or any top-down direction to make sure we have steel production for our military so we can have a Navy, so we can protect trade routes and stuff like that. And then he talks about the free market not being good on a long enough time horizon. And I get some of the arguments people make. They just think quarter to quarter, you got to do this and that to make sure you made more money than last time. But the market is going to provide things that we're always going to need, first off. And so there's probably always going to be a need for steel. Now the need for steel kind of decreases as we find alternative resources that could be used and might be easier to get.
I hear they're making submarines out of carbon fiber now.
Yeah, you can do carbon fiber stuff. So that's one thing. And it just made me think of the market, of course I go to Elon Musk a lot. I mean, look at the time horizon on what SpaceX has been doing. Like Elon Musk, he wants to go to Mars. So he's like, I got to make a bunch of money, so I'll go to Mars. And he's like, I know, I'll provide the entire world with internet. How am I going to do that? I got to make the cheapest and best rockets that have ever been invented. And so they go and do that. And then they now are talking about putting AI data centers in space because they can be cooled and powered 24/7. And that's actually a massive solution, and that's going to beam down your AI stuff for you from space, and you don't have to worry about all this stuff here on the planet. And I'm like, the time horizon for these people, Jeff Bezos with his Blue Origin stuff specifically said, I'm thinking on a 200-year time horizon, and that will eventually won't even need to generate energy here on the planet. We're going to get it off the planet.
With Amazon stuff. I mean,
think about this, the time from here's how the market values things too. Amazon had a market cap of $1 billion in 1997. They went over $1 billion in 1997. Just 4 years after they started. The market cap. They didn't make over $1 billion. It's for over 15 years after that. They just kept losing money the whole time. Like, why was the market valuing this thing at over $1 billion when it was just losing money every single year? They were thinking on 20, 30, multiple year time horizon. Same thing with Tesla. Tesla was valued over $1 billion in 2007 or 8 or something like that. And they didn't even make their first profit until 2021. It's the first time they profited as a company. But the market was valuing that, and they were directing resources towards that.
Market has an extremely long time horizon.
Yeah.
It is the best solution, by the way. You want to know a worse solution? What they did in Russia.
Yeah.
Because it didn't work out long term.
No, it didn't work.
It's so wild to me we have this clear evidence of these methods not working. And the method of a generally free market could be freer, but of it working.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're going to compare the two and be like, we need to go with the thing that didn't work.
Do it
to
better.
Make the thing that's working work better. Like, what are you talking about?
Let's take the things that didn't work from this and add it to the thing that has worked, but make the things that made it almost not work even worse, and that should do it.
That's what he's saying.
So I think that the government needs to intervene in this case and basically say, like, we're not going to import these manufactured goods from China. We have to make them ourselves. We need to subsidize them. And maybe we bring people on, onto the dole of the state in a public works program to accomplish some of these things. So I believe in an intervention from the state to do that.
Well, okay. So I understand, by the way, tariffs, I understand. And especially when you look at the revenue they'll be generating, I don't think that's an infringement of the free markets. I think it's a correction of an unfair market, of a market where we've been fleeced. So I think we agree on that. Subsidies are massive public works. I mean, we have a debt. Is it 39 trillion? I haven't looked at the clock recently. So I certainly wouldn't say that we haven't been subsidizing things. We absolutely have, and we can't afford it. And the old joke, right, in Russia is they pay us to look like we're working, and we look like we're working. Like they look like
they pretend to pay us, and we pretend to work.
Right,
paying us, we look like we're working. We've done this here in the States. I mean, if you go back to FDR, and maybe you're a fan of FDR's approach. Certainly Barack Obama, the biggest modern spending package. I was around for that. Shovel-ready jobs was awful. And same thing for Russia. I mean, if you throw enough bodies and human suffering at something, you can get something done. But even then, it was still significantly behind the world that was more free, the United States. So where have we not done it? Because I look at it and I go, well, we have been subsidizing almost everything. I agree with you on China. I agree with you on tariffs. I think that's a huge threat. What would that look like?
Well, I don't think we've been subsidizing industry. I'm not saying just like subsidies across the board. I mean, we need to actually subsidize and prioritize the industries that we need in the country. So like, for example, the CHIPS Act, I think that was a great thing. I don't think it was enough, and I don't think it was comprehensive, but I want more things like that. Like, there's no reason why, they're doing it in Arizona. They're bringing TSMC over to Arizona. They're building a chip fabrication facility. We need that, and I think the government should give tax breaks or just straight up give subsidies to the companies that are going to do that. And I think that we need aggressive trade negotiations. I guess maybe where we differ ideologically is that I want a very smart government. I liked what Doge did. I like the idea of bringing people from the private sector into the government. And even Trump said that in 2016 to work on trade deals, to work on, for example, China.
How did he like the idea of Doge when Doge's stated purpose was to cut the things the government was doing? That's what they were doing. Doge is like the government is subsidizing all these things and they shouldn't.
Yeah.
And so,
but we need to subsidize.
Yeah, I mean, eviscerate. So Doge, at the end of the day, Doge didn't, I mean, there might be some contracts canceled. They're probably just going to do new contracts and, stuff like that. But
look, he likes the idea of authoritarianism and subsidizing and all these things that the government already does. He wants them to do more of it, but he wants them to do it in very specific things that
smart ways
that he thinks. Mm-hmm. His central planner, if it's not him, is going to be the right guy or girl to operate. Probably guy. He probably doesn't think girls can be powerful. It'd be the right guy in charge for a certain amount of time. He even said that can smartly organize these things like an angel in the way in which we need them to be the most powerful country on earth, even though we're already the most powerful.
Yeah, the problem is we're
through freedom.
We're already living currently in the result of most of Nick's ideas right now. We had a strong man for 3.5 terms. That he loved the New Deal. That was great too. So we already had the problem is, as more time goes on, different people have different ideas of what the government should subsidize, and then it gets spread out in all these other parts of the administrations, and that's how it goes on a long enough time horizon. That's what I mean, is that you can start, maybe
think about all the things the Somalis are doing in Minnesota.
Yeah. Like they
needed to be subsidized for the great industrial work that they're doing.
What happened with the Somali pirates in Minnesota is a result of Nick Fuentes' economic ideas. Okay?
That's the title of the show.
That everything he wants is how we got the Somali pirates stealing $1 billion in Minnesota, because you're going to create that structure. And then you'll go back to having, not 3.5 terms. So no longer a dictator now that you're just term limited. But now this strong man and this subsidizing of industry and this directing of the economy that he wants to do is going to get changed term after term, every 2 years. And then we end up with where we are right now. We already did it. We already did this.